Good evening. It's January 8th, 1990. We are in Channel 4 WIVB in Buffalo, New York. My name is Toby Tichton-Back, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Resource Center. And today our guest is Leah Weinrieb. Leah, would you tell us your story from the very beginning? We know that you were born in 1917 in Russia.
Yes. In 1919, my parents left Russia because they deserted the Red Army and they entered illegally into Germany. My father took a job there as a coal mine worker, and we got permission to stay because he was a political refugee.
Could we ask you, what did your father do in Russia?
In Russia, he, I don't remember really. I was only 2 years old.
Right.
And I don't really know what he was doing at that time.
All right, so let's go on.
Yes. But I know from there on that he took a job as a coal miner, and later he had several accidents in the coal mine. My mother managed to take him out of the coal mine, talked him out of it, and we started a furniture store. So, and that went well till about 1933. In 1933, there was already talk that the Jewish people in Germany would have not a secured life anymore. So my father just managed to leave Germany, at that time Duisburg, Rhineland, and we went over the border illegal into Netherlands.
I think at this point it's appropriate to show your family picture. Will you tell us how old you are and where you are here?
At this picture, I was about 4 years old, and we were in Germany, in Duisburg. And there's my brother, David. He was 2.5 years younger. And my mother and my father.
And you're the little boy with the cute little boy with the hat.
With the marine hat.
With the marine hat.
Yes.
Okay. So shortly after this, the family goes illegally to Holland.
After 1933, we entered Netherlands in Amsterdam. And we were actually just immigrants, and we were not allowed to remain in Amsterdam. So there was a Jewish committee, and they made us legal papers to get into Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And Brazil, we had permission to stay, but after 8 months, we found ourselves, the climate was not...
it was very hot.
It was very hot.
But what did you do during those 8 months to stay alive?
My father worked in a brick factory with very enormous heating facilities, and I worked in a leather factory, learning the trade of making pocketbooks and ladies' belts.
So you were in your teens?
I was about in 33, 35. I was about 18 years, 17, 18.
Before you get on to that stage, you know, we neglected to talk about your childhood in Germany and even later on in Holland. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up?
Yeah, in Germany, I went through the regular public school. I also went 2 years through art school, and I started learning a trade by a company called Karstadt, Rudolf Karstadt, or the EPA company, just like it was here a Woolworth, but a little bit more modern. They had more higher priced items, and I learned window dressing, and that was about for 1 year. And then I was actually fired because I was a Jew.
Oh, so that was your
first,
first indication of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's right. And I was not allowed to stay there. So and after that, my parents decided we just should leave Germany.
So that was the 1933.
In that area, yes.
But during the time of growing up, you had a Jewish education?
I had a Jewish education. There was Dr. Kaiser. He was one of our teachers. And actually, the very first 4 years where we were living, there was no Jewish school. And I went into a Catholic school. And after 4 years, a Jewish school came up with Jewish teachings, and there was always a synagogue, and we belonged in the synagogue as a member. And I learned Judaism there. Plus, my parents hired a special tutor, like it was a rabbi, which taught us like a cheder.
Jewish subjects.
Jewish subjects, yes.
And you had your bar mitzvah in Germany.
In Germany I had my bar mitzvah, and we kept Jewish tradition to a certain extent. My parents were not over-religious, but the holidays they observed very, very faithfully.
So in 1933, your parents saw, as they say, the handwriting on the wall. You went to the Netherlands. From
Yes.
there you went to Brazil. Now we're back in Brazil, and the temperature is too difficult for
Too
you after
difficult.
8 months, and you're thinking of
Yes.
migrating again.
Yes, but my father also had foresight, and he said, let's not go back to Europe, because in a few years later we will have Hitler all over Europe.
Oh,
And he was right.
he was certainly was.
And he was advised not to go back, but we still took a chance, and we figured we might still survive. We figured we couldn't believe that he could resort to practices like he did.
To conquer all the nations.
To conquer the nations, and we are human like that. We figured
Yes.
he might take us to work in order to win a war, but not to kill a certain amount of people because they have a certain faith. So anyway, we took the chance, we came back to Netherlands. And
So
then
it's about 1935,
in
I presume.
1935 we came back to Netherlands, and then we get permission from the Dutch government to stay. So then I managed to make my own designs in leather goods, especially ladies' belts, and I started my own little factory.
But you're only 18 years old.
I was only 18 years old. And it went very well. In about 8 weeks' time, I had 8 people working. And then I was looking for a larger space. And I found myself not able to make my own designs from pocketbooks, because my learning period was only several months in Brazil. But I had enough knowledge what leather was and what the whole business was all about. So I imported from Paris a family, Marcel, and he was a pocketbook designer.
Was
And
he Jewish?
he was Jewish, and with his designs, we also went to department stores, and I managed to get nice orders, and we did very well business. And by the time it became around 1940, we got invaded by Hitler again. So at that time, I lost my factory.
You mean the Germans took it
They
over?
took it over. So then I managed to get some hold of some merchandise, which was like, it is now called plastic. We called it cellophane. And I made ladies' capuchons.
Rain hoods?
Rain hoods. And there was one wholesaler who could take my whole production.
Now, where did you do this?
I just cut it in where I was living, in the attic again. And I hired about 80 women, house women.
And all in your attic they worked?
No, no.
Or they took
they
took it
the
home?
work home. I just cut it up there, and they took the work home, sewed it, and made it all ready, brought it back, and I shipped it to the wholesaler.
Wasn't it rather chancy, though, if the Nazis knew you were doing this?
It was in the
Would be
very
troublesome?
begin. It was in the very begin. We still could manage to up to 1942, but in the meantime they had some razzias going. Like they closed up some bridges, and whoever was in the street, especially young boys, they took off the streets, sent them to Mauthausen, and then they sent back the ashes to the parents who paid for it.
Oh.
So, and that was really the first indication then that we, then
Did you have to wear a star already?
Yes,
What year did you wear a
yes.
star?
we started wearing a star right away about, I would say about a half a year later when they entered.
1940.
Yeah. So, and then an underground started in Amsterdam, which my brother David was involved.
Underground of Jews and non-Jews.
Jews and non-Jews, in fact, all political parties. Communists, Democrats, churches, Jewish people, non-Jewish people. They all pulled together and formed an underground. But every underground had its own selective people. One underground group didn't know from the other. So my brother belonged to a certain group with my other brother too. And I also became anonymous, only doing things, not as officially as they were with the group, but whatever the group needed, I was asked to do, I did.
Like what, for instance?
Like we came back from Brazil, and we had Brazilian papers. And some of the people which had nothing, the Amsterdam Jewish people, they lost their homes already, and they had also to hide, or they took them away and sent them into a camp into Westerbork in Netherlands. There was one family particular who, the woman was pregnant and she was about to receive a baby. And my brother asked me, Leo, there is a family, man, wife, the woman has no house, they have no house anymore, would they be able to come to you? And I had the Brazilian papers. Actually, I had freedom of wearing a star since the Germans found out that I was a Brazilian, which I was not a Brazilian.
Oh, so you didn't have to wear a star?
After I showed my Brazilian papers, they said I should take my star off.
Oh.
Because I'm a Brazilian, and I wasn't a Brazilian, and they didn't know how to read Spanish. So they said, since you're Brazilian, you never need to wear a star. So I took my star off.
But they didn't realize you were Jewish?
It has nothing to do with it. There were a certain type of Jews, like American Jews, Brazilian Jews,
so they were
English
exempt.
Jews, they were still exempt. Except the Polish, the Russians, the German Jews.
And the Dutch Jews.
And the Dutch Jews, they couldn't do this. So since I had freedom of taking off my star, my brother said, you want to take in a family? And I said, sure. So they came to us, and this family is still living right now in Victoria, British Columbia. And they got a little baby in our house, illegal. Her name is Betty. And we just received a letter from her. And she's in the 40s now.
Now you hid this family in your house, is that what you're saying?
Yes, we did.
And the Brazilian papers were a good identity, helped
yes.
a cover.
Was a cover, actually, for the neighbors and for the Germans, that we were not really on the list to be taken away.
But what did you do for, I presume you had food stamps by that time. There was rationing, was there not?
Yes, there was rationing and food stamps, but I had, with this work which I did, I made so much money in about 8 weeks' time that I split it among my father and my brother, and I could even take a hiding from it eventually, and I too. I made about 33,000 gulden in 8 weeks' time.
Which is a lot of money.
Which was a lot of money. So we didn't care with the food stamps or not.
So you could buy food.
We could buy food, whatever the price was, so we bought food.
Very enterprising, aren't you?
Yeah.
So the family stayed in hiding all during the war with you?
No. It's just, I took in this family, and the family later, after 6 weeks, were taken away by the underground, and they got a hiding place.
Oh, I see.
With the baby, the man and wife, and they survived the war.
Yes.
So after I did illegal work, let's say, sometimes spreading out coupons, food coupons, to people which were hiding. And sometimes we had signs that the Germans are coming out to pick up Jews. So I went out into the east of Amsterdam and spread the word around where Jewish people were living, and they took precautions. So 1942, we became ourselves in danger, even the Brazilian Jews, because we were saved through a 10,000 stamp, they called it.
What is that?
That was an identification. In our ID cards, they put a 10,000 stamp. And with a 10,000 stamp, Jewish people were spared. They were not supposed to be touched.
So you were not taken to Westerbrook. You
Not to
weren't
Westerbrook,
designated
no.
to be
In
taken.
the meantime, my brother, since he wasn't on the ground, he had access to the people which were taking care at the Jewish people when they were already supposed to come up for shipments into Westerbork. And my brother was in charge with the Jewish committee. They called it Judenrat.
Oh, the Judenrat, the Jewish
yeah.
council.
So he got me a job in one of those theaters where they
rounded them
rounded up the Jewish people. And with this job, I got one of those armbands with a Mogen David, blue-white. And again there, I was saved not to be touched by the Germans, because I was a part of it to help those people, to make them convenient when they entered in this theater. But the underground, which my brother belonged to, and I was also with it, we had a task. When people came in, we tried to smuggle out children out of this theater, and we got them hiding places. And I also took out, I was especially in the department of the bags which they took in, and I smuggled those bags out of there. But the guards which were in the front, by other underground people, they were sometimes misled and made drunk. So then sometimes 2 or 3 hours, something could be done.
Now, what are these bags?
Well, the bags from the people which entered this theater.
Oh, their own
up,
personal belongings.
Yeah, their belongings entered also. In those belongings, they had to disappear in order not to have anybody there anymore.
Right,
See,
not
I mean,
to confuse the Germans.
That's right. So anyway, we did this for quite a couple of years.
Excuse me, before you go any further, is it about this time that you get married?
In 1940, I got married.
In 1940?
In 1940.
40. And how?
No, wait a minute, 41. 1941.
And how did you meet your wife?
I met my wife before I started the factory. A short time, I managed to sell German bread to the German Jewish immigrants.
German bread?
German bread, which was baked by German Jewish bakers in Amsterdam, and this I distributed to
the German Jews who had come across the border.
That's right. And that was a short time only, and then I met her family, and I met Ursula, and we knew each other for quite a few years, but we never really got in touch. And one time there was a dance, and she was a little older, and I was a little older.
A loiter?
A dance.
A dance?
A dance from a cafe, and we met at this dance, and
you decided to get married, 1941.
We decided.
Did Ursula do underground work with you too?
While we were married and while we were in hiding, she had certain tasks, yes, because I at that time couldn't go even on the farm where I was hiding. I couldn't show up outside.
Wait, you haven't gotten to the farm yet. You better get us to the farm. Yeah. All right, so you're working in the underground.
Yeah.
And so take us from there.
I was working underground, and one day we were notified also by the underground that we were not safe anymore with a 10,000 stamp. So Ursula had an aunt in Amsterdam, and the aunt was non-Jewish, married to her uncle, which was Jewish, and they had 2 children, which were Jewish, and the children were hiding. The uncle was in hiding already in Amsterdam, and the aunt was non-Jewish, and she called us up one evening that we should come and see her. And this very particular evening, we went over there. The next day we went back to our house, and the house was locked and sealed up by the SS police.
Oh.
So
you didn't have a place to be.
no more a place to be. So my brother had also at that time a girlfriend, and they were well-known Jewish people, the Cohens from Venlo. The father owned an umbrella factory, and she had entrance in Venlo by the farmers to get us hiding places. And she was aware of it, that we were in danger, Ursula and me. We had no place to sleep anymore. We slept in places at that time where Jewish people already were taken away.
Abandoned
places,
houses.
yeah.
And you didn't have any luggage. You didn't, just what's on your back.
We had nothing at all. Not even our pictures or nothing, or wedding evidences.
Nothing.
No papers, no nothing.
And this is 1942?
That was in 1943. In 1943.
So the situation is very drastic.
Yeah, that was already when they started on the Jews. All the Jews were already liquidated in Amsterdam. And then they got to the Jews which were foreign Jews, like American Jews, Brazilian Jews, and so forth. So the underground took care of us. They sent a man to Amsterdam, and we never knew the man. And we met at a certain place, and he took us on a train, and he took us somewhere, Ursula and me, on a farm, and we just entered a very, somewhere in the sticks, a farmer. And when there was a farmer and a farmer's woman and 3 children at that time. And the man looked, to me, he looked frightening. When you saw him, he was like, I would say, like one of those cave people.
Primitive.
Primitive, very primitive, but golden-hearted people.
Did the underground pay these people to keep you?
No, they didn't pay anything. Those people did things voluntarily and they didn't charge anything. They just took people in need, which need to save their life, and let them live there.
And you worked there?
I was supposed to work, but it was dangerous to work for a man outside, not even a Jewish man, but Christian people. They couldn't work outside on the farm at that time, after 43, because the Germans took all young men and sent them into work camps.
Yes, so they didn't want to be seen.
And we didn't want to be, I didn't want to be seen. Ursula could be seen outside. But at that time we received from the underground false identifications with false names. Ursula's name was Mientje Nat, because her original name was Nartelski. They figured if they ever get a hold of her and she had to sign her name, by the time she makes an N-A-T, she wouldn't go farther. She would know already she shouldn't make a mistake.
Yes.
And my name, false name was Lai, it's a Dutch name, a Dutch Limburg name, Weinberg. Weinberg is a Christian name in Holland.
Oh, it is a Christian name.
Yeah, it's with a long Y. It's not an E-I or an I-E.
I see.
So I was Lai Weinberg. And then, of course, for the Germans, I don't know how much it meant, because by the Germans, Weinberg was Jewish anyway, see. So...
so you're in this house with your wife. Are there other Jews in hiding in the farmhouse too?
No, no.
Just the 2 of
No.
you and the farmer and the farmer's wife and the 3
Yes.
children?
And we were there, and then they asked us to call them mother and father, and we did.
Who's mother and father?
We should call them...
Oh, well,
those
you should
people,
call them mother and
Mother
father.
and father, and we did.
Right. You were young people and they were
Yes.
decidedly older.
And then once in a while, they made us aware if the windmill on the very front of this village stays a certain way, then we should hide somewhere, because then the Germans are roaming around.
Otherwise, you were free in the house?
In the house, we could go around free, and there was a little attic room we were sleeping, and I built in this bed we were sleeping a double bottom, about this high. In other words, there was a bottom, and I made another bottom, another...
So that's a false bottom, you mean?
False bottom, and then on top I put the mattress. There was no mattress, we were sleeping on hay. The farmers were very primitive, they had no mattress either, sleeping on straw. So I put the same thing on there, and if it's necessary, sometimes in emergency, we could go into the false bottom, and there would be a chance maybe to hide out.
Leo, what did you do all day? And what did Ursula
Nothing.
do?
My feet became swollen that big when I was sitting in the attic room.
Oh, you didn't have any
And
activity.
I had a small little room, a small little window to look out.
And you had nothing to read? These people probably
They had
didn't
no
have much.
papers, they had nothing. In fact, I had a hard time. I was asking for toilet tissue. They said, what do you need toilet tissue for? You're a healthy person.
Oh,
And then they start teasing us. We are from the city. City people need papers and papers. And we weren't supposed to wash us either. They had a well, a water well, and he took a little bit water out, sometimes for the horse. And sometimes they washed like this a little bit, but...
did you eat with them?
No, we in the beginning we did, but then we asked permission to do our own cooking. And Ursula started up in the attic room to cook on a little, they call it a chicken oven, to heat a chicken koi. There was a little cast iron burner, and she put a pot up there and did her own little cooking there. Once in a while we ate together, but they were not too clean. But they were good people.
How old were the children?
Small. There was Scharke, Toontje, and who was the other one? Scharke, Toontje, and Karltje.
And they were little
And
children.
they were about, I would say, about 4, 5, 6 years old.
So you at least could play with the children.
Yeah, I was doing actually all day nothing. And then he asked me sometimes to come on the field, and I refused because I was afraid if the neighbors would see me, or
Or the
if the Germans
were
would
passing
make
by.
a quick fallen in the village, and I wouldn't have a chance to hide again.
Now, how long were you with this family?
We were with this family to the end of the war.
So from 2 years.
It was about almost 2 years, yes.
So it was very frightening, wasn't it? You never knew. Did they have a radio? Did you know what was going on?
Yes, we managed to have a radio, and we could, in fact, there was a radio which was the BBC. We had from England. That was also illegal, but we had information. And as soon as there was one time when the English Scotch came first into our village, and then the Americans followed, and then the Russians followed. But when the English Scotch came in, I said to Ursula, I go to the headquarters and I'll be back soon.
And
No.
where were the headquarters?
It was in the village.
In the village.
And I put on the English uniform and I went with the English into Germany voluntarily and drove in a convoy of 60 trucks, food and ammunition into Germany. And she was waiting for me. And it took about, and when I went into Germany, I managed to get into Bergen-Belsen a permission from the captain there.
Well, it had
From the
already
different-
been liberated? Is that what you're saying? It
This
was
part,
45?
this part
was already liberated.
liberated where I was in the south of Netherlands and into Aachen. And I went into Germany in with the English, and then I was trying to get into Bergen-Belsen to find my parents. They were already in 1943 taken into the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen.
Now, how did you know they were in Bergen-Belsen?
I knew they were in Bergen-Belsen because the Auschwitz people were already way before taken away, and they were taken away on this 10,000 stamp,
The Brazilian stamp.
Brazilian stamp, and they were actually put into a camp where there was not an immediate death camp. They starved them to death by not giving them any food or little food, but there was no gas chamber there. So and that was a camp where certain foreign Jews, which were from foreign countries, they survived in there.
But how did you know that your parents were in Bergen-Belsen?
We know that at that time a transport went to Bergen-Belsen. And
The underground.
Yeah, the
that
underground.
You know.
And they went with the same transport. So, and that was on that same evening where we weren't home.
Oh, when you were at the aunt's.
When we were at the end and we came back, our house was closed and we went to our parents' house and it was also sealed up, but they were taken away.
They had been taken away.
Yeah, and
It's always these lucky times, the one-time occurrence.
Yeah.
You could have been there and been taken away
yeah.
too.
But before, there was a chance also that, I mean, there was another chance we had. When they took the razzia,
What's a razzia?
the razzia means when they closed the
An
street,
action?
an action, with all those green trucks and green SS and the black SS uniforms, they closed the street and they took all the Jews out from one street. And in that particular street, they took us down too. And I had my band and I said, I got to go into the Schauburg, they called it, this theater, and help working with the Judenrat.
Ah, so that was how you got out of that.
That's how I got out of that big razzia. Otherwise, we would have been in Auschwitz.
So in other words, your parents were in Bergen-Belsen for 2 years while you were in hiding for 2 years.
Yeah. We probably would have gotten to Bergen-Belsen too because I had the stamp. So, but at this particular transport, when they cut off that street, went to Auschwitz.
Oh,
so
sure.
maybe I went to Auschwitz then, who knows? But downstairs, I was lucky. I spoke to the German. I said, I have to go to work now. How am I going to get through here? So all the Jews went this side. He said, go ahead and go through the guard and you go. I said, my wife is upstairs. He said, go and ask your wife and take her along.
What a lucky break that was.
And then I came to another guard there. There were 2 guards. And I said the same thing. He said, go ahead. They opened up and they let me go.
All right, so now it's 1945 and you're in Bergen-Belsen. Do you find your parents?
No, I went to Bergen-Belsen and then I was told that a transport of 500 people went into a train and they went to Tröbitz, sent in before the Elbe. And the Germans were thinking to drown this train. But they never got that far because the Allies came and they pushed them back. So the train went back and forth a couple times, I heard, and finally this part was freed. So when this part was freed, and I was freed actually.
What month is this?
The month I don't remember anymore. That was about in 1945, close to 46, 45 and a half. I volunteered to the repatriation bureau where the leftover people from concentration camps arrived, finding out if anybody could come back from my family. And indeed, there was a girl which she came and she brought a note saying a handwriting from my father. And she asked if there's any Weinrieb here, she wanted to give the note. And I was a Weinrieb.
Yes.
And then I know they survived.
And where were they?
And they came from Germany to this repatriation in Eindhoven, in Netherlands.
DP camp, displaced person
Yes,
camp.
displaced person camp. And I received them and I took them into the village where Ursula was waiting for me.
The farm village.
Yeah.
And what condition were they in?
My mother was, she went into the camp, she had about 250 pounds. And she came out, she was about 80, 85 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And my father looked a little better, he looked stronger, and he worked in the kitchen, I found out.
Oh, so that helped.
So he
him.
survived probably with the food he managed.
And how was their mental state?
That was normal. In fact, my mother went in with a diabetes illness into the camp, and when she came out of this camp, she was cured from her diabetes. Of course, she lost a lot of weight. She had other problems, but one illness went.
Strange how that happens. So you had a wonderful reunion with your parents and Ursula. Now, what about your brothers and their family?
Well, I'd like to mention one more thing, which is very important. Before my parents went to Bergen-Belsen, they were caught in this big razzia, with this big roundup, where I was caught, and I had a chance to go
to the theater.
They were caught in this action, And they were supposed to be also sent to Auschwitz. So I took an ambulance outside. In front of the theater, I waited. There were ambulances going. And I paid the driver 200 gulden. And I put on a white coat, like a doctor. And I went in with him, with this ambulance. And I asked him if I give him the money, if they would come with me with a branca to the place.
What's a branca? A stretcher?
A stretcher, where all the Jews were lined up. And I may have to take out my family. And they said, okay. So we drove down to this plaza, and I happened to speak German perfect. And
Why, did you speak German at home? How did you learn to speak?
We spoke German at home. My parents spoke Jewish to us, and once in a while they spoke Polish, and we didn't understand them. But we mostly used the German language at home.
From school, because that was your first
Yes, it was actually my
education,
language.
your first language.
Yes. So I managed to open up a real German mouth to the Germans which were guarding those people.
In the Umschlagplatz.
Yes, and I had my white coat, and I thought I was some kind of a big shot there from the Germans. And I said, this lady has to, and I right away went in through the guards, and I saw my mother laying on the floor with saliva, and she had a seizure.
Oh.
She happened to be luckily ill,
So it was,
which helped me too.
yes, it was very
And my
appropriate.
father was sitting next to her crying, and my sister was sitting also next to her crying. So it took about 2 minutes, and I said, this lady is sick, she has to go to the hospital. They didn't know they were my parents. And right away I took one other family along into the ambulance, and I smuggled out those people and my parents into a Jewish hospital. And that's how they were saved from the Auschwitz transport.
Right.
And later they were picked up once more and sent into Bergen-Belsen. That was the evening.
Oh my, that was all that evening when you were
I
visiting.
was visiting, yes. So then you asked me the other question about my brothers.
Your brothers.
My brother and my other brother and my sister, they all got hiding places through the underground. And they survived.
And they also were in farmlands?
They were also in
farmers?
farmlands. In fact, my brother David lost his place through his farmer for some reason, and I gave him permission to come into my place. He was with us about a half a year in one room. It was not a pleasant situation, but there was no choice. I couldn't send him out.
No. And were any of them married? Did any of them have families? Your brothers,
No, my
your
brother wasn't
sisters?
married, the other brother wasn't married, and my sister wasn't married. And my sister was in a different place, and she lost her place later too. And they came to us.
Well, you say you lost a place. Why would they lose a place? The farmers would be afraid?
Sometimes it became dangerous in a certain area that the Germans were snooping around too much, so he was afraid to be there.
I see.
So he was looking for a
another
different place. So I was the closest to come to if my place was still good.
How did you communicate? Through the underground?
Through the underground, yes. It wasn't always possible. Most of the time, when parents had children, they didn't know where their children were hiding. Oh, and then I forgot another thing. In this place where the Jewish people came back from camps in Eindhoven.
In the displaced persons camp.
In the displaced, no, that was in the repatriation place,
Yes.
where the Jewish people came back already free from the camps, some of them which survived. There was a little boy. And the boy had no home, no parents, no nothing. So there was on the radio announced if anybody wants to take and adopt a child. So I raised my hand and I adopted him, I brought him home to us on the farmland. And this child later, from the surviving people, were found the real parents from this child.
Oh, what a
And they were
wonderful
also
story.
friends of mine. In fact, they were in the same leather business I was in.
So you knew this little boy. You knew the little boy.
I didn't know the boy.
Oh, you did know the boy,
No,
but
I
you knew
found
the
out
parents.
later to the parents
Oh.
because that was their boy and he had a big mark on his foot here, on his thigh. And they later remembered him.
It's a wonderful story.
And their name is Mochidlov, and they emigrated to Australia. And I'm sure they're still alive there. And from those people from British Columbia, we just, not too long ago, about a year ago, we had a letter that they're all in good shape and the daughter's alive, and they thanked us for...
For helping them to survive.
That's right.
Now, so your family is all reunited. It's 1945.
Then my parents came back in 1945 from Bergen-Belsen.
And where did you go? Where did you all go?
I took them first to the farmland.
Yes.
And they, we pepped them up there a little bit.
Yeah, you fatten them up, right?
Fatten them up. And there was another lady, Mrs. Unger, we took along. She had nobody anymore. And we settled her there too, in the farmland. And after a while, I got a hold of farmers which manufactured wooden shoes. And I made my own souvenir from little wooden shoes. And I painted them, and I made them in perfect shape.
You're always so enterprising.
Yes, and then I gave those farmers, and I took those wooden shoes, and I ordered a big amount of wooden shoes with windmills painted on there. And I managed to sell them to wholesalers to Amsterdam, by the carload. And I had them manufactured by those farmers in Limburg, and they went to Amsterdam.
So you established a cottage industry right then and there.
And I made fast money there too.
And are you still staying with the farmers, or are you back in Amsterdam?
No, I still was with the farmers, and I wasn't back in Amsterdam, because Amsterdam was freed a little later. See, in the meantime, I just manufactured those shoes by large amounts. I still had money. And I transferred those wooden shoes when Amsterdam was freed into Amsterdam, and the wholesalers bought them, and they sold them to stores. And then the American Army soldiers and English soldiers, they bought them as souvenirs.
Yes.
And I made a lot of money with that fast too. So I installed my parents and my whole family in Amsterdam with furniture and apartments.
Your own, did you go back to your apartment, or did you get a new apartment?
No, I got another apartment for myself in Amsterdam. So that was helping us also. That was with the wooden shoes. What else was there which was important?
So this is 1945, and it's the end of the war.
The end of the war.
And how long was it before you immigrated to the United States?
Between 1946 and 48, I have an uncle in Pittsburgh. I had an uncle in Pittsburgh, and he was an early immigrant already in the United States. He used to be a teacher, and he married a very wealthy lady there. And he worked in the same industry in wholesale yard goods. And that was the Bergen family. And he supported his whole family in Canada. He took them down from Poland and Russia into Canada, and he made papers for us into the United States.
And how are you related to him?
He's my real uncle. He's a brother of my mother. He's the oldest.
So he brought his
Uncle
mother, he brought his sister and the family over.
Over.
And did you go to Pittsburgh?
And I just went once to Pittsburgh to visit him there. And he always came to Toronto, and he came to Buffalo to see us.
Well, how did you get to Buffalo? You came directly from Europe to Buffalo?
I came, from Europe to New York, and I didn't like New York. It was 6 months I was living in New York, and it was too crowded. And you come from Amsterdam, it's a quiet surrounding against New York.
Yes,
It's a city too, but not quite like New York. And I thought, I have 2 little children. I came with my daughter Margie and Ilya to New York. And at that time, we couldn't take any money with us. We were allowed only to take 25 gulden per head, which was nothing. But I had still money left from the factory, and I had money left from what I did, and I managed to buy $2,000 in black market guldens. So I paid, instead of 2 gulden for $1, 8 gulden for $1. So I paid 16,000 gulden for $2,000. So I came with $2,000 to the United States. And that's how we entered New York.
Yes.
And then I rented an apartment there, and then I bought some neckties from a wholesaler, and I stood in front of Macy's, opened it up, and I made in one day as much as people made in a week. And I did that for half a year about, and I made enough money to move to Buffalo because
but why did you come to Buffalo?
I have a lot of family in Toronto.
So why didn't you go to Toronto? Because you couldn't
I
get
had a
in?
choice. I had a choice to the United States or Canada. I had 2 visas, and I chose the United States. And I still didn't make a mistake up till today.
No, we're happy you
Yes,
came here.
I still like the United States.
I wanted to ask you about the aunt, the Christian aunt with the Jewish uncle and cousins. Did they survive?
No, he was later found in his illegality, and the 2 children were sent to Auschwitz. And she survived, and later after the war, they didn't came. She noticed they didn't came back, so she got out of her mind. She lost her mind.
Oh,
She
that's a sad story.
became.
But most of your family survived?
My mother and my father survived. My brothers and sisters survived. And some of my uncles didn't survive in Poland.
So your family came to America in 1948, and we have some pictures here. Maybe you want to show us what this picture is here, Leo.
Well, this is my sister with her youngest baby already in California.
Now your sister
No,
and
that
brother...
was, pardon me, that was in Toronto, wasn't it? With Linda? She was in Canada.
And this is 1954.
That was in 1950.
But your family, all your family came to Buffalo, and this picture was just taken in Canada, or they went to live in Canada?
My parents came to New York, and then they came to Buffalo too. And my sister went to Canada because she married an Israeli and moved into Canada, Toronto.
I see. And does she still live in Toronto?
No, she moved from Toronto into California, and over there they divorced, and she has 2 children, and he lives in Los Angeles and she lives in San Diego.
I see. Now this picture, we see your sister and the little niece again, and this is your mother, I presume, yes?
That is my mother, and that was still in Canada when my mother visited her.
Is your mother still alive?
No, my mother passed away 20 years ago in San Diego.
And your father too?
And my father too.
And they went to San Diego because the sister moved from Los Angeles to San Diego?
No, my sister came to Buffalo from Toronto. My mother and my brother came to Buffalo from New York. And I went from Buffalo to San Diego and pioneered San Diego.
Oh.
And everybody moved to San Diego, and I moved there too, and I came back to Buffalo.
And why did you come back?
That's why Ursula, she hates me for that. She won't forgive me for this.
You just thought that Buffalo would be better
I
for
still like the East. I like the East. I like Eastern culture, and I like the life in
Now we
East.
have another picture, Leo. Tell us about this picture.
Well, this picture here is, let's see, my mother, my brothers.
All your brothers,
My sister is there.
your brothers are in the back, you told me before, and yourself in the white shirt.
Yes.
And the little man, or the
Is my
shorter, is
father.
your father.
That's
And
my father.
where is this taken?
And that must have been taken, it looks like Ursula, Sylvia, Ellie, my mother, and Irene. I believe that was taken here in Buffalo.
And this is in the 50s too?
Let's see. It looks to me that was about, 35 years ago,
Okay.
according to the way I look there.
And I think we have a last picture.
That was in 1960 about.
1960. And are these people in the front your parents?
In the front is my mother, my father, again my sister, and my two brothers, included me.
And you. So this is a complete family picture.
That's a complete family picture.
And this is what year and where?
And this must be also between 55 and 60.
And when did your father die?
My father died in 1965.
So did your parents get used to living in America? Were they in good health, good spirits?
They were all right till my father got a heart attack in California. And my father worked very hard here too. He worked at the Morrison Steel.
In Buffalo?
In Buffalo. My father was not much of a businessman.
But you were. You made up for it.
I made up for it. And he worked in California. He worked in a department store. He always worked.
Leo, what did you do when you came to Buffalo?
Well, when I came to Buffalo, I took a job with a high-grade paper company, selling industrial papers to stores and institutions. And I had at one time a job collecting money.
You're a collector.
And I bought a car, and I was cheated by somebody sold me a taxi cab car, and I didn't know. And the car blew up on me.
Oh.
And I went to the Niagara Falls and collecting.
You could have been killed after all those narrow escapes in
Yeah, I
Europe.
managed to get out of the car. The car started burning.
What was your major occupation in the United States?
In the United States, when I sold, mainly I sold for the high-grade paper company, and then later I managed to buy a pawn shop on William Street from a pawnbroker. And the company kept the same name, Warnick's Pawn Shop, and I kept that for about 8 years. And after that, I moved to California.
Oh.
And in California, I worked for the J.C. Penney Company in the electronic department. And after that, after 2 years, I moved back to Buffalo. And in Buffalo, I started wholesaling jewelry.
And that's what you did most of your
Sold to
adult
department
life.
stores.
You're
Yes.
very versatile. You've been in so many different kinds of businesses.
Yeah, it's business basically is business. Just you have to try to learn the merchandise you're dealing with. And if you have a ability to analyze people, who is a buyer and who is not a buyer, then you have a chance to sell your merchandise.
Leo, about your years in Europe, when you and Ursula were in hiding, did you tell these stories? Have you told these stories to your children and grandchildren?
Not most of it, not, no. In fact, we were trying to keep away from the children as much possible.
You wanted to shelter them.
Hate stories, which would hate people.
Yes.
They would probably wind up hating.
Except that you had stories where people sheltered you and took care of you.
Well, partly of that they know. Later we came out a little bit, but not enough, really.
Did any of these people who helped the underground, did any of them become righteous Gentiles?
The parents and the children from those people which were underground, we are still in touch with them.
You are?
Yes. And those children, we probably would like to make righteous people. And the parents, of course, they're not alive anymore.
Yes.
Because right after the war, the man I was underground with, he walked on a mine on his field.
Oh.
And,
And
he
he
lost
was-
the lake. He lost the lake. He was still surviving, but a lake got ripped off from him. And then years later, he was surviving, but after the war, I had a chance to buy him a chicken farm.
Oh, so you helped him.
Oh, yes, financially.
You did help
In
him.
fact, while I was at his house, they didn't want to take any money. So I asked to his priest to come to speak to me. And he came. And the priest came and I asked him, I said, I have money with me, I can do nothing with it. Why don't you let me give those people every week money? And he talked to those people and he said, it's not a sin if they would accept money from us. And every week I gave them money and they could at least buy more. But they were not real farmers, they were more, he was a milk driver, milk supplier.
Yes.
And he had his own chickens and his own pigs and his own this and that, but not much like a farmer. And a little bit field, a little bit potatoes. So he was poor. So, but then we managed in the winter, he can get coal, so he could.
So you bettered his life.
Yes,
you decidedly bettered
and
his
after the war, I managed to buy a chicken farm for him. And he.
And you remained in
yes.
touch with him.
And after that, we visited children in Netherlands. And I asked them many times to come over here. They're welcome. And if they ever would, I told them they would be at no charge at my expense.
That's very nice. I hope they come sometime. We have to conclude very shortly, Leo. Do you want to say anything in conclusion, any message, any statement, any thought that you have about your life, your experiences, what happened to you?
Well, all I can say is that I'm glad that the world is awake now and is aware of all things a human being is capable of doing, which we never thought they would be capable of. And especially the people in Germany, which had a name of such a high culture. Now, if they were capable of doing what they did, then we have to be aware of and very much stand guard that such a thing should not happen anymore.
No, and with
To the
people
world.
telling the stories, it won't. Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you very
Yes.
much for telling us your story. And I'd like to specifically acknowledge at this time the floor director, Hal Case, who's helped us these many years with all of our testimonials. Thank you very much.
Okay.